My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 28 years old. And before the alert ever hit our phones, before the rules and the roadblocks and the laughing, my life was small, predictable, and quiet in the way only a town pressed against a massive forest can be. I worked nights as a maintenance tech for the county communications relay outside Briar Hollow, wore the same black hoodie with a faded logo, dark jeans, and steel-toe work boots every shift, and drove the same two-lane road that cut along the tree line like a scar, always telling myself the woods only felt alive because people project fear onto dark things they don't understand. But even then I hated how the trees leaned inward, how sound traveled wrong after sunset, how laughter from town never echoed the same way laughter from the forest did. My job was simple on paper: check towers, clear debris, reset backup generators when storms rolled through, keep the infrastructure breathing so everyone else could sleep. And most nights it was just me, my truck headlights, and the forest watching quietly from both sides of the road. The first strange thing happened 3 weeks before the emergency alert, subtle enough that I dismissed it, when I stopped near mile marker 14 to clear a fallen branch and heard what I thought were campers joking somewhere deep in the trees, men laughing hard and loud like they'd just heard something stupidly funny. But the sound didn't carry right, didn't bounce, and when I shut the truck door the laughter stopped all at once, like someone had cut a wire. I remember standing there, branch in my hands, listening to the sudden silence and feeling embarrassed for being unsettled, telling myself I was tired, that night work messes with your head. But as I drove away, I saw movement pacing my truck through the undergrowth, low and fast, always just outside the beam of my headlights. I didn't tell anyone because there was nothing to tell, not yet. A week later, during a routine generator check near the northern access road, I heard laughter again, closer this time, clearer and wronger, because it came in bursts that matched breathing but didn't pause between breaths, like lungs that didn't need air. And when I shouted for whoever was out there to cut it out, the laughter answered back using my voice, same tone, same cadence, same nervous edge I get when I try to sound casual. I left immediately and pretended it never happened. That was my mistake. The emergency alert came on a Tuesday night while I was halfway through a relay inspection, phone buzzing violently in my pocket, radio crackling at the same time, both screens flooding red in a way I'd never seen outside of drills, the tone deep and vibrating like it was meant to be felt through bone instead of ears. And when I looked down, the message was short and clinical, too calm for what it implied. Emergency alert. Do not enter wooded areas after dusk. Do not respond to auditory stimuli from forested zones. If you hear laughter, leave immediately. Wait for further instructions. No agency name, no weather explanation, no expiration time. The forest around me went silent the second the alert ended, like it was listening for my reaction. I remember the cold settling in my stomach as I got back in the truck, hands shaking against the steering wheel. The trees suddenly too close, too tall, and then the laughter started again, all around me this time. Dozens of voices layered together, some young, some old, some broken, none attached to bodies I could see. And beneath it all was a wet, animal sound, a panting rhythm that paced the truck perfectly no matter how fast I drove. When I reached town, the roads were empty, streetlights flickering, the diner dark, the gas station shuttered, and taped notices flapped on doors warning people to stay inside after dark, not to investigate noises, not to answer voices calling from the woods. The county issued new rules the next morning, printed sheets stapled to poles and doors, listing protocols like this was a fire drill instead of something hunting us. Rule 1. No forest access between sunset and sunrise. Rule 2. No search parties after dark. Rule 3. If laughter is heard, do not call back, do not signal, do not attempt contact. Rule 4. If laughter uses a familiar voice, seek shelter immediately. I stood there reading them in my boots, hoodie zipped up against the cold, watching the tree line ripple as if something tall was moving just behind it. And when someone laughed from inside the woods using my name, I finally understood the alert wasn't a warning anymore. It was an admission that something out there had already learned how we sound. The rules didn't slow the laughter. They only made it smarter, because once the town started obeying curfews and sealing windows and pretending the forest wasn't there after dark, whatever lived beyond the trees adjusted its schedule. And by the third night after the alert, the calls started coming in through my work radio, even though I wasn't supposed to be dispatched anymore. Voices breaking through static with whispered panic about shapes pacing their houses, about something moving just outside porch lights, and retreating the moment a flashlight clicked on. I was reassigned from field maintenance to night monitoring at the county relay hub, a concrete block building perched on the edge of Briar Hollow like a bunker, where I sat alone under humming fluorescence watching camera feeds pointed toward roads we'd officially closed, still wearing my black hoodie, jeans, and steel-toe boots, because it felt wrong to change anything when everything else already was. At 12:46 a.m. on Thursday, the first real protocol came down from the state, stamped confidential and slid under the door by a deputy who wouldn't meet my eyes. If auditory mimicry was detected, do not engage, do not respond, do not remain stationary. If visual contact with forest entities occurred, log location, retreat to lit area and await instructions. Under no circumstances pursue. It read like someone had already made all the wrong decisions and written the rules afterward. The first death happened an hour later. His name was Tyler Boone, 31, road crew, same kind of job as me, practical guy, married to his work. And he broke Rule 3 because he heard laughter that sounded like his brother and stepped into the tree line to tell him to knock it off. The only thing found was his truck, still running, door open, headlights illuminating a stretch of dirt road torn up with deep, dragging marks like something heavy had been pulled backward on too many limbs. The forest camera nearest the site glitched at 01:58 a.m., froze for 9 seconds, then came back showing nothing but swaying branches and fog. We were told to log Tyler as missing, presumed animal encounter, and the phrase tasted rotten in my mouth as I typed it. That same night, I heard them myself for the first time without glass or distance between us. I was walking to my truck at the end of shift when laughter rolled out of the woods across the parking lot, soft and casual like a group of guys sharing a cigarette, and I almost answered before catching myself, my throat tightening around my own name being spoken back to me in my exact voice, relaxed, familiar, inviting. I drove home with my hands locked at 10 and 2, eyes flicking constantly to the rearview mirror as shapes paced the tree line parallel to the road, sometimes dropping to all fours, sometimes rising too tall, their movement wrong in a way that made my brain refuse to finish the picture. The official encounter came 2 nights later when the perimeter sensor tripped at the old Ranger access gate, and I was ordered to monitor the feed instead of dispatching anyone, because by then the standing order was no boots on forest ground after dark. The camera showed a shape stepping into the cone of infrared, thin and long, its limbs bending at angles that suggested too many joints, its head hanging low as if heavy, and when it lifted its face toward the camera, its mouth stretched wide into a grin that didn't belong on any animal I knew, lips pulled back too far, teeth too uniform, too human. The sound came through a second later, delayed and crackling, laughter layered over a deep panting that shook the mic, and then it spoke, not loudly, not threateningly, just conversational, using the voice of Sheriff Callahan, who died of a heart attack 6 years ago. "You can come out now, boys." I backed away from the console, heart hammering, as another shape slid into frame behind the first, then another, all of them smiling, all of them laughing in voices borrowed from people I recognized, people who were gone, people who shouldn't have been remembered that clearly. That was when the new protocol dropped, colder than the rest. If mimicry matches known deceased individuals, escalate to federal oversight and initiate blackout. The blackout meant no public alerts, no news, no explanations, just silence and compliance. The second disappearance was Deputy Mark Ellis, last seen sitting in his cruiser at the edge of Ridge Road, engine idling, radio still transmitting low-level static, and a single sound beneath it that made my blood run cold. Mark's own laugh, looping over and over, growing more distorted each time until it dissolved into something animal and wet. His cruiser was found at dawn, parked neatly, keys on the dash. No sign of struggle, no tracks leading away, just deep impressions around the vehicle like something had stood there for a long time, listening. After that, the forest stopped pretending to hide. Laughter drifted into town before midnight, echoing between houses, testing doors, lingering near windows, and sometimes it sounded like me, sometimes like Tyler, sometimes like voices I didn't recognize at all, each one calibrated to make you lean forward instead of run. We were given one final rule, handwritten and passed quietly between officials. If you hear laughter inside your home, do not answer, do not flee, and do not investigate. Sit still in the brightest room until sunrise. I followed it the first night I heard them on my street, sitting rigid on my couch while something paced just beyond the fence, laughing softly in my own voice, practicing my tone, my pauses, my breathing. And when dawn finally came and the laughter faded back into the trees, I understood the truth we weren't allowed to say out loud, that whatever was in the forest wasn't just hunting bodies anymore. It was studying us, and it had all night to learn. The files weren't meant for me, which is probably why they were so easy to find once the blackout started. Because when agencies move fast, they hide things in plain sight. And all it took was a forgotten login at the relay hub and a maintenance clearance level nobody bothered to revoke to open a directory labeled Project ECHOWOOD, buried 3 layers deep behind infrastructure schematics and weather modeling software. Its contents dated back nearly 12 years. Long before Briar Hollow ever heard laughter coming from the trees. I remember sitting alone in the control room at 2:03 a.m., hoodie pulled tight, boots planted against the concrete floor like that might anchor me, scrolling through scan documents while the forest cameras looped silently in the background, every few minutes glitching just enough to remind me something was still moving out there. The first report was clinical, bloodless, written by someone who'd never had to listen to their own voice come back wrong. Initial anomaly detected following unexplained decline in gray wolf populations within designated forest zone. Behavioral shifts observed. Vocal mimicry, synchronized movement, predatory intelligence exceeding baseline. Further down, highlighted in yellow, was a sentence that made my stomach turn. Specimens demonstrate adaptive learning through auditory exposure. Repeated listening accelerates mimicry fidelity. That explained why the rules focused so heavily on silence, why answering was death. The second file included necropsy photos I couldn't make myself fully look at, blurred shapes of stretched muscle and bone laid out on steel tables, annotated with phrases like non-Euclidean joint articulation and laryngeal structures incompatible with known mammalian species. Someone had handwritten a note in the margin, not wolves anymore. Project ECHOWOOD, according to the timeline, began as a wildlife study after a logging company uncovered a network of limestone caverns beneath the northern forest, caverns that produced acoustic anomalies, echoes that didn't decay, sounds that looped back altered, laughter recorded once and replayed hours later with no source. The first disappearances were written off as accidents. The first mimicry incidents were classified as hysteria. Then the researchers started hearing their own voices in places they hadn't been, and the funding tripled overnight. I found the protocol section next, the part they never intended civilians to see. Rule A, do not engage verbally with entities. Rule B, do not allow prolonged auditory exposure to a single voice. Rule C, terminate subjects who exhibit signs of vocal contamination. The word terminate was underlined. My hands shook as I scrolled. Names started appearing in the casualty logs. Tyler Boone, Deputy Ellis, 3 others listed as acoustic assimilation failures. And beside each was a timestamp that matched the moments their voices began appearing on the forest feeds. That's when I understood the pattern. They weren't killing people to eat them, they were killing us to record us, to refine their collection. The creatures needed voices the way we need oxygen, each one a tool, a lure, a weapon. The deeper I went, the worse it got. A classified memo from 2 years ago warned that the entities were no longer confined to the cavern system, that they'd learned to hunt above ground, that their bodies were adapting to allow longer excursions away from the echo chambers that birthed them. The recommendation at the bottom was chillingly simple: relocate population center or initiate controlled burn of forest zone. Someone had stamped DENIED across it in red. Too expensive. Too visible. Easier to issue rules and hope compliance bought time. The final file I opened was labeled Project ECHOWOD, Phase Black, and it was newer than the rest, updated just days before the emergency alert went out. It detailed a shift in behavior I'd already lived through. Entities demonstrate targeted mimicry, selecting voices of individuals with frequent nocturnal exposure. Evidence suggests recognition of specific subjects and premeditated pursuit. There was a subsection titled Subject of Interest, and when I saw my own name there typed in cold government font, I felt something hollow out in my chest. Marcus Webb. Occupation, County Maintenance Technician. Exposure level, high. Notes: subject has repeated solo nighttime exposure within forest perimeter. Recorded auditory anomaly following him on multiple occasions. Recommend monitoring, potential vector for wider acoustic spread. I wasn't just a witness. I was bait. The reason the laughter followed my truck, my house, my street was because I'd spent months driving those roads alone at night, giving the forest hours of my voice through radios, phone calls, muttered curses, songs I didn't realize I hummed. I slammed the laptop shut when a soft laugh drifted through the open window of the relay hub, close enough that I felt it against my neck, the sound playful, curious, using my voice to test itself. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe. The next escalation happened at dawn, when federal vehicles rolled into Briar Hollow without sirens. Men in unmarked jackets setting up portable towers and signal jammers around town, while officials told us it was infrastructure support. I watched from the relay hub as one of the forest cameras finally stayed live long enough to show the truth. A pack moving through the trees with deliberate coordination, bodies tall and emaciated, skin stretched tight over bone, limbs bending backward as they ran upright for a few steps before dropping to all fours, their heads turning in unison toward the town like they could hear our heartbeats. One of them paused, lifted its face, and laughed softly in Tyler's voice, then in mine, then in something deeper and older that scraped along my nerves. A message came through on a secure channel moments later, addressed directly to me. Mr. Webb, remain at your current location. Do not attempt to leave Briar Hollow. Your cooperation is essential. I knew then that Project ECHOWOD wasn't about stopping the creatures anymore. It was about managing them, feeding them just enough voices to keep them predictable, contained, useful. The forest wasn't a problem to be solved. It was an asset that had gotten loose. That night, as the laughter circled the relay hub and something heavy leaned against the outer wall, breathing wetly through concrete, I made a decision that probably signed my death warrant, because I copied every file I could onto a drive, shoved it into my hoodie pocket, and promised myself that if I was going to be studied, hunted, or worn like a voice, it wouldn't happen quietly. The laughter outside rose, layered and eager, and somewhere in it I heard my name spoken with perfect familiarity, like the forest already knew I figured it out. I didn't leave Briar Hollow the right way, because there was no right way anymore, only windows of opportunity measured in seconds between patrol rotations and the brief gaps when the forest went quiet. And the escape plan formed in pieces as I watched the federal teams fortify the town instead of evacuate it. Portable lights trained inward like we were the threat, signal jammers humming so loud I could feel them in my teeth. The files made one thing clear. The creatures learned faster in groups, and they hunted best when they felt control, which meant the only chance I had was to move when they thought they already owned me. I waited until the laughter peaked, until it circled the relay hub in a loose ring, dozens of voices overlapping, my name spoken casually like it was already theirs, And then I killed the interior lights and slipped out the maintenance door wearing my black hoodie, dark jeans, and steel-toe boots, moving low, slow, silent the way the rules had taught me. The forest edge rippled immediately, shapes shifting as heads turned in unison. But I didn't run toward town like they expected. I ran straight at the trees, at the old fire road that led deeper into the northern section where Project ECHOWOOD had started, because every protocol I'd read said the same thing between the lines. They didn't like unpredictability, and they hated when prey chose the dark willingly. The first scream came from behind me, a man named Lewis, one of the federal contractors I'd shared coffee with hours earlier, his voice breaking as something caught him near the portable tower, laughter exploding around him in a dozen borrowed tones as his scream cut off mid-breath. I didn't look back. I couldn't afford to. The forest swallowed me whole in seconds, branches tearing at my hoodie, boots slipping in mud, the smell of wet leaves and rot filling my lungs. And then the laughter changed, sharpened, narrowed, focusing on me like a lens snapping into place. Rules flashed through my head as I ran. Don't answer, don't mimic, don't let them hear you breathe too steady, don't follow paths. I veered hard left into undergrowth so thick it felt like pushing through bodies. And that's when I saw them clearly for the first time. Not on a screen, not through glass, but 10 feet away, pacing me between trees, tall and emaciated, skin stretched tight over bone, limbs bending backward as they ran upright for a few steps before dropping down, mouths open in wide, wet smiles that never closed. One of them leaned close enough that I smelled it, copper and decay, and laughed softly in Tyler Boone's voice, just to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. I kept moving, heart hammering so loud I was sure it could hear it, and that seemed to irritate them because the laughter grew harsher, less playful, more animal. The sabotage point was an old research outpost half-collapsed near the caverns, its generator still active according to the files, feeding power to underground sensors, and if I could overload it, maybe I could blind them, slow them, buy time. I reached it just as the forest erupted behind me, branches snapping, bodies crashing through brush with impossible speed, and I slammed the door shut behind me, metal screaming as something heavy hit it from the outside. Inside, the air was stale and cold, equipment humming, red warning lights blinking like a heartbeat. I ripped open the main panel and started pulling cables blindly, sparks flying, the laughter outside turning frantic, layered voices shouting my name in anger now instead of amusement. The first breach came through the wall, not the door, concrete cracking inward as a limb punched through. Too long, too thin, joints folding wrong, fingers splaying like they were tasting the air. I grabbed a fire axe from the wall and swung hard, feeling resistance, hearing a sound like tearing fabric mixed with bone, and the limb recoiled, shrieking in a dozen voices at once. The generator screamed as it overloaded, lights flaring white-hot, and for a moment the laughter outside fractured, voices slipping out of sync like a broken choir. That was my opening. I ran through the back exit as the outpost exploded behind me in a concussive wave that knocked me flat, ears ringing, forest lit up in a brief, terrible daylight that showed the full pack converging, dozens of them, heads snapping toward me in perfect unison. I sprinted blind through smoke and debris, lungs on fire, until something tackled me from the side, slamming me into a tree so hard stars burst behind my eyes. I felt breath on my face, hot and wet, smelled rot, saw teeth inches from my throat as the creature hovered there, studying me, eyes bright with something like curiosity, and then it spoke in my voice, perfectly calm. "You should have stayed." I screamed then, raw and wordless, because pain and fear finally broke discipline, and the creature laughed in delight, tightening its grip, claws digging into my ribs. A gunshot cracked the air, deafeningly close, and the thing jerked back, shrieking, as another shot followed, then another. A man named Aaron Pike, one of the last state troopers who hadn't disappeared yet, stood behind it, firing wildly, face white with terror, yelling for me to run. I didn't argue. I rolled, staggered to my feet, and ran as the pack descended on him, laughter exploding into chaos. His screams cut short in seconds, his voice instantly joining theirs, calling after me in perfect mimicry. I ran until my vision tunneled, until the forest thinned and pavement appeared under my boots, until headlights blinded me and I collapsed hard onto asphalt. When I woke up, I was in the back of an unmarked ambulance, hands cuffed, ears ringing, a federal agent staring down at me with flat eyes, telling me Briar Hollow was being evacuated for a chemical spill, telling me Aaron Pike died in the explosion, telling me nothing I'd seen was going to be officially recorded. Through the rear doors, as we pulled away, I saw the tree line ripple one last time, tall shapes standing just beyond the lights, laughing softly in voices that belonged to the dead, and one of them lifted its head and spoke my name with affection, like this wasn't over, like it was only delayed. 6 months have passed since Briar Hollow was wiped off the map, officially erased by a chemical spill that never happened. Its residents scattered across counties with non-disclosure agreements they didn't understand and trauma they weren't allowed to name. And I've learned that time doesn't blunt what you hear in the dark. It just gives it more room to echo. I live 3 states away now in a town that doesn't touch a forest, working night maintenance again under a different badge number. Same black hoodie with the faded logo, same dark jeans, same steel-toe boots. Because some habits feel safer when the rest of your life has been stripped down to contingency plans and exit routes. The federal agents told me I was released from observation, but I still catch the same black SUVs idling down the street some nights, engines running, lights off, like they're waiting to see if I laugh back. Briar Hollow was fenced off within weeks, roads buried, satellite images blurred, the forest labeled an environmental hazard zone, and anyone who asks too many questions gets redirected to a press release that says wildlife overpopulation caused auditory hallucinations under stress, which would almost be funny if I didn't still hear them sometimes. Aaron Pike's name never appeared in any report. Tyler Boone officially wandered into the woods drunk. Deputy Ellis retired early according to county records, and Project ECHOWOOD doesn't exist outside the drive I buried in a storage unit under a false name, because even I'm not stupid enough to keep it close. I don't talk about what happened, not really, but my body remembers it anyway, flinching at laughter in parking lots, freezing when someone says my name too casually from behind me, heart stuttering every time I hear overlapping voices in enclosed spaces. The worst part is the quiet moments, the ones just before sleep when the world feels thin, because that's when I remember what the files said about adaptation, about recognition, about how the entities didn't hunt randomly anymore, they curated. 2 months ago, a ranger I'd never met was found dead near a restricted forest in another state, his body untouched, his mouth stretched into a smile that cracked his jaw, and the local news mentioned unexplained laughter reported by hikers for weeks before the incident. Different forest, same rules. I know the pattern now. The forest doesn't matter. The caverns don't matter. We do. Voices do. Every time a late-night radio host jokes on air, every time a dispatcher mutters into a headset, every time someone sings alone in the dark because they think no one is listening, something else is. I still get messages sometimes, not alerts, not official, just a vibration on my phone at 2:17 a.m. with no text, no sender, the same time Tyler disappeared, the same time the forest first really spoke back. And when I don't check them, when I leave the phone face down and sit perfectly still in the brightest room, I swear I can hear something outside, breathing patiently, waiting to see if I'll slip. The government didn't shut Project ECHOWOOD down. They renamed it, relocated it, folded it into something else with a budget line that doesn't ask questions. Because you don't destroy assets that learn this fast. You study them until you can point them somewhere else. Briar Hollow was practice. I was practice. Sometimes, when exhaustion hits just right and I'm driving home before dawn, I hear laughter pacing my car on empty highways, staying just outside the headlights, never crossing into the light, and I know better now than to speed up or slow down, because it's not chasing, it's matching. I've stopped humming. I've stopped talking to myself. I've learned to breathe irregularly when I'm alone, to vary my routines, to never give the dark anything it can practice with. But I also know that doesn't make me safe. It just makes me less interesting for now. The last thing a federal agent told me before cutting contact was meant to sound reassuring, but it wasn't. They don't forget voices, Marcus, but they do prioritize. Somewhere out there, beyond fences and burned zones and redacted reports, something is still laughing softly to itself, replaying us, refining us, waiting for the next place where the rules come too late. And every night when I lock my door and sit in silence until sunrise, I remind myself of the only rule that ever really mattered, the one that might buy me another day. If the laughter knows your name, it's already close enough to hear your answer.